Under the sterile brightness of Sterling Medical Center, a silence thicker than the walls themselves seemed to hum through the air. It was the kind of silence that came only after something extraordinary had just shattered the ordinary. Just hours ago, William Cross, the billionaire genius whose software empire touched nearly every screen in America, had collapsed live on national television. One moment he was discussing artificial intelligence and the future of humanity. The next his words turned to static. His eyes rolled back and he fell to the stage floor. Motionless now in room 903, the man who once ruled over data, markets, and men lay powerless in a hospital bed surrounded by machines that refused to explain what was wrong with him. 15 of the world's finest doctors stood around him, white coats gleaming under the fluorescent light. Each represented a different mastery of modern medicine: neurology, toxicology, cardiology, psychiatry, and more. Yet for all their expertise, they were united by one shared confusion. The monitors beeped steadily, his vitals normal. His MRI scans were clear, blood work flawless. To the untrained eye, William Cross looked perfectly healthy. But his body trembled. His words came in broken gasps, and behind his eyes, something unseen was spreading like frost. Dr. Alan Peterson, the lead neurologist, moved with the poise of someone accustomed to being right. "It's clearly neurological," he said, his voice sharp, echoing off the glass. "We're looking at atypical synaptic misfiring, perhaps an undetectable variant of motor neuron disease." Dr. Maria Williams glanced at the data on her tablet, her brow furrowed. "But his neural imaging is clean, Alan. There's no lesion, no atrophy, nothing that matches the symptoms." Peterson gave a tight smile, one that hid irritation more than confidence. "Sometimes the data lies, Maria. The patient doesn't." Around them, the other doctors shifted, exchanging uncertain looks. None dared to challenge Peterson outright. Reputation was currency in Sterling Medical Center, and he owned the mint. Outside the room, the hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. A janitor's cart squeaked as Diane Bowmont pushed it slowly past the door, her movements practiced and invisible. She had been scrubbing these floors for 8 years, long enough to know that people rarely looked down. Beside her walked her son Kevin, wearing his oversized hoodie and pushing a smaller mop. At 14, he had the kind of quiet presence that made people forget he was there. But behind his stillness, his eyes burned with curiosity. He didn't just see the hospital. He studied it. Every beep of a heart monitor, every coded conversation between nurses, every sigh behind glass walls. He remembered it all. Through the thin partition, Kevin could see the circle of doctors moving around the unconscious billionaire like planets around a dying sun. He paused, his mop dripping slightly against the polished tile. "Mom," he whispered, "they're checking the wrong things." Diane's hand froze on the handle of her cart. "Kevin," she murmured under her breath, "don't talk like that. We're just here to clean." But Kevin didn't look away. His gaze followed Dr. Peterson as he ordered another round of tests, his tone colder now, desperate to regain control. Kevin's mind was already connecting dots, patterns of tremors, timing of symptoms, inconsistencies in the test results flashing across the monitor. Something didn't add up. Inside, Cross suddenly convulsed. The room erupted. Alarms blared, nurses rushed in, and Dr. Peterson barked orders. "Increase oxygen flow. Prepare for cardiac monitoring." Kevin's pulse quickened as he watched the chaos unfold through the glass. One of the monitors flickered, showing a brief spike in mercury levels just for a second before it vanished from the screen. No one noticed. Except him. He leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass. "Mercury," he whispered almost to himself. But the word was swallowed by the noise of the emergency. For the next several minutes, the team worked frantically, stabilizing the billionaire's vitals. When it was over, Peterson removed his gloves and exhaled heavily. "We'll figure it out," he said to no one in particular. "We always do." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Behind the glass, Kevin stood perfectly still. His mother touched his shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's keep moving." He nodded, but his mind was racing. He wasn't supposed to care. He wasn't supposed to see. Yet something deep inside him, a mix of instinct and brilliance, was telling him that the answer was right there, hidden in plain sight. As the doctors left the room, their silhouettes fading under the sterile lights, Kevin and his mother passed by unnoticed. The mop water rippled as they moved. reflecting the pale glow of the billion-dollar machines. And in that reflection, for the briefest moment, the future shifted. No one knew it yet. Not Dr. Peterson, not Maria Williams, not even William Cross. But the boy the world never saw was about to change everything. The night in Sterling Medical Center stretched long and uneasy, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint rhythm of heart monitors echoing down the sterile corridors. Outside, the city slept under a thin mist, unaware that inside its most prestigious hospital, the man who owned half its skyline was slowly fading. William Cross lay still, his breath shallow, his mind slipping in and out of dreams laced with pain. Machines whispered beside him, blinking in quiet defiance of the 15 doctors who couldn't explain what was killing him. In another part of the hospital, where the polished marble floors gave way to dull gray tiles, Diane Bowmont pushed her cleaning cart through the hall, her hands raw from bleach and soap. The hospital after midnight was hers alone, a world emptied of authority and filled with echoes. Her son walked beside her, dragging the mop in long, deliberate strokes. Kevin Bowmont had grown used to this nocturnal rhythm. His mother cleaned and he watched. He watched everything. The way nurses charted vitals, the way doctors whispered diagnoses, the way machines blinked out warnings in coded rhythms. He had memorized them all. "Kevin, baby, hand me the wipes," Diane said softly. He passed them to her but didn't look up. His gaze was fixed on the glass window at the end of the hall, the one that led to Cross's suite. He could see shapes moving inside. White coats shifting, heads bowed. The quiet panic of people who had run out of answers. "Mom," Kevin whispered. "They're missing something. They keep treating him like he's sick on the inside, but it's not that." Diane stopped wiping. "Honey, please, don't start with that again. You know what happened last time you tried to tell a nurse about that man with the wrong IV drip?" Kevin didn't answer. He remembered too well. The glares, the threats, the way his mother had nearly lost her job for his curiosity. But something about this case was different. He could feel it. Inside the suite, Dr. Peterson stood before a wall of monitors, his reflection caught in the glass. His once slick hair looked disheveled now, and his white coat was wrinkled. "His vitals are stable," he muttered, frustration cracking through his composure. "But his tremors are worsening. This isn't supposed to happen." Dr. Maria Williams looked up from her notes. "Maybe it's not neurological," she said carefully. Peterson turned sharply. "Then what is it, magic?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her eyes, retreating into silence. From outside, Kevin watched their exchange through the small gap between the blinds. His fingers pressed against the cool glass. He could see the pattern, the confusion, the frustration, the same error over and over. His mind moved faster than his heartbeat, cataloging details. The medicine trays, the timing of Cross's spasms, the untouched water glass beside the bed. Something about that glass nagged at him like a whisper just beyond hearing. His mother's voice broke through the silence. "Kevin, let's go. It's almost 2. We still have to clean the East Wing." He followed her reluctantly, pushing the mop down the corridor. But even as they turned the corner, his mind stayed in that room. He could still see the billionaire's hand twitching faintly under the sheets. Half an hour later, while Diane scrubbed the nurse's station, Kevin wandered back toward the suite. The hallway was quiet, the night shift reduced to whispers and distant footsteps. He crouched by the door and listened. Through the vent above, voices drifted down, sharp, tired, desperate. "Tox screens are negative. He's getting worse every hour. Should we increase the morphine?" Kevin's stomach tightened. Morphine. That was wrong. He remembered reading about it in one of the medical journals he'd found in the recycling bin. How it could suppress breathing. How it could hide symptoms of poisoning instead of treating them. He stood up slowly, his heart thudding. He could see Dr. Williams inside. Her shoulders slumped as she scribbled notes. Dr. Peterson was pacing, muttering under his breath, his pride cracking under pressure. Kevin's whisper trembled in the air. "You're not fixing him. You're killing him." He turned and ran back to his mother, his sneakers squeaking against the tile. Diane looked up, startled. "Mom, he's getting worse. They're giving him the wrong medicine." "Kevin," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "You can't talk like that. Those are doctors. You'll get us both fired, but Mom, I saw it, I know it. He's not sick the way they think. It's something else, something he's being given. Please, just listen." Diane looked into her son's eyes. those deep, steady eyes that had always seen too much, and for a second she hesitated. But fear won. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You can't help him, baby. Not in this world." Kevin fell silent, but the fire in his chest didn't fade. He glanced back down the hall toward the gleaming door marked Private, Intensive Care. Inside that room, the greatest medical minds in America were losing a battle they didn't even understand. And just outside, a boy with a mop and a mind full of brilliance stood on the edge of a secret that could save a life, or destroy everything his mother had fought to keep. The morning broke cold and gray over Sterling Medical Center, its glass walls reflecting a sky heavy with rain. The corridors, once humming with confidence, now echoed with unease. Nurses whispered, technicians moved faster than usual, and the name William Cross floated from every mouth like a question no one could answer. Inside the intensive care wing, tension clung to the air like static. Dr. Alan Peterson stood at the foot of the billionaire's bed, arms folded, jaw set hard. He had barely slept. The lines under his eyes betrayed it, though he'd never admit it. The 15 doctors surrounding him looked no better. They were exhausted, brilliant minds bound by the same invisible wall of failure. "Let's run the scan again," Peterson ordered, his voice sharp. "Full panel? I don't care if we've done it 10 times. Dr. Maria Williams glanced at him, hesitant. "Alan, his body can't take another full imaging dose. We've done every test known to medicine. The data says he's fine." Peterson's eyes flared. "And yet he's dying right in front of us. Does that sound fine to you?" His outburst silenced the room. Cross lay still, his skin pale and clammy, his breathing shallow. The billionaire's empire was still functioning outside these walls, his name trending online, his company's stock trembling. But inside this sterile room, the man who had conquered the digital world was losing to something no one could name. Outside, unnoticed by all, Kevin Bowmont was mopping the hallway floor with slow, deliberate strokes. His mother was on another level of the hospital, leaving him temporarily alone. Through the narrow glass window of the suite, he could see the circle of white coats arguing. He could read their lips even from this distance. Autoimmune. Infection. Neurological. Psychosomatic. Words, theories, guesses, none of them fitting the pattern. Kevin's heart pounded. He could see it so clearly now. The subtle tremors, the discoloration at the fingertips, the irregular timing of each convulsion. It wasn't disease, it was exposure. Poison. He gripped the mop handle tighter. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing something no one else could see. Inside the suite, Peterson snapped, "Enough. Increase the morphine. If he's in pain, we manage it." "That's what we do." Maria stepped forward. "That could suppress his respiration." "I said increase it." The silence that followed felt like a verdict. A nurse obeyed without meeting anyone's eyes. Kevin couldn't take it anymore. The sound of his own heartbeat thundered in his ears. Before he could stop himself, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. 15 pairs of eyes turned toward him. The room froze. "A boy with a mop didn't belong here." "Who let you in here?" Peterson barked, fury rising in his voice. Kevin swallowed hard. Please don't give him that dose." A murmur rippled through the room. The boy's voice was soft but steady. Peterson glared. "Excuse me?" Kevin took a shaky breath. "You're treating the wrong thing. It's not his brain. It's not his nerves. He's being poisoned." The air seemed to stop. Maria blinked, startled. "What did you just say?" Kevin pointed to the monitor, to the pattern of symptoms that danced across the screen. Look, his tremors started right after his evening routine. Every time, his blood oxygen drops a few minutes later, and his fingertips see the gray at the nails. That's mercury exposure. It's poisoning him slowly. The doctors stared, caught between disbelief and offense. Peterson's face flushed with anger.
"This is absurd!"
"Security!" But no one moved. The other doctors hesitated, uncertain. Kevin stepped closer. "You keep saying it's neurological, but none of your scans show nerve damage. If you keep giving him morphine, it'll make it worse. It's suppressing his system." Peterson's voice rose to a dangerous calm. "You think you understand medicine because you sweep a hospital floor? Kevin didn't flinch. No, sir. I understand because I watch, and because I listen. A soft gasp came from Maria. She looked at the data again, her hand trembling slightly. The timing did match what the boy said. The tremors, the oxygen drop, the discoloration. It was impossible, yet perfectly logical. Peterson turned to her, incredulous. Don't tell me you're entertaining this nonsense. Maria's voice was quiet. Alan, what if he's right? Peterson's expression hardened. Enough. He stepped toward Kevin. You don't belong here, and if you ever interrupt my work again, I'll make sure neither you nor your mother work in this building another day. Kevin's throat burned, but he didn't back down. You'll kill him if you don't stop. 2 security guards entered. Diane appeared moments later, breathless, fear written all over her face. Kevin, what are you doing? They pulled the boy back, his mop clattering to the floor. Peterson turned to the guards. Get them out of my sight. As they dragged Kevin toward the door, he shouted one last time, his voice breaking through the sterile air. Check his toothpaste. It's in the toothpaste. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence hung over the room. The doctors looked at one another, shaken despite themselves. Peterson rubbed his temple, muttering, Ridiculous. But Maria couldn't shake the boy's words. Toothpaste, it sounded insane. Yet somewhere deep in her chest, a tiny thread of doubt began to pull. Down the hallway, Diane scolded Kevin in whispers, her voice trembling. You can't do that, baby. You can't just walk into their room. Kevin looked back toward the closed door, eyes bright with a strange calm. He's dying, Mom, and they're too proud to see it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain started outside, streaking down the tall glass windows of Sterling Medical Center. Inside, 15 doctors returned to their instruments and their data. But in the silence that followed, one thought lingered in Dr. Maria Williams's mind, a single word she couldn't forget. Toothpaste. The next morning, the city woke to rain, soft, steady, relentless. Water streaked down the tall glass windows of Sterling Medical Center like tears, blurring the skyline beyond. Inside, the air was different now. Something unseen pulsed beneath the surface of professionalism. Doubt. William Cross's condition had worsened overnight. His heartbeat had grown erratic. His speech, once sharp as a blade, had become slurred whispers. The billionaire who once commanded global markets could now barely lift his hand. In the conference room adjacent to his suite, the 15 doctors sat in uneasy silence around a long, polished table. Half-drunk coffee cups and stacks of charts littered the surface. The tension between them felt heavier than the rain outside. Dr. Alan Peterson stood at the head, his tone clipped, his confidence wearing thin. We're running another full toxicology panel. I want every variable checked. One of the younger specialists, Dr. Burke, frowned. That's the 3rd time, Alan. We've tested his blood, his food, his air filters, everything. The results are clean. Then test again, Peterson snapped. Dr. Maria Williams sat near the end of the table, her pen motionless in her hand. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy from last night, the janitor's son. His words echoed in her head with uncomfortable precision. He's being poisoned. It's in the toothpaste. She should have dismissed it. She wanted to. But something about his tone, that unwavering conviction, had unsettled her. Not arrogance, certainty. While the doctors argued, nurses whispered in the halls. Word of the janitor's son had already spread through the staff like wildfire. Some laughed. Some wondered. Some quietly admitted that no one had ever seen Dr. Peterson this unsure before. Downstairs, in the service corridor, Diane Bowmont scrubbed the same patch of tile for nearly 5 minutes, her movements distracted. Kevin sat nearby, pretending to dry mop handles, his face pale from a sleepless night. Kevin, she whispered finally, glancing around to make sure they were alone. You can't keep doing this. They'll fire me. They might blacklist me from every hospital in the city. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the floor, but his mind wasn't there. It was back upstairs behind those glass walls. After a long silence, he said quietly, He's dying, Mom. I saw it in the numbers. It's not a sickness, they're making it worse. Diane's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. You can't save everyone, Kevin. He looked up, meeting her gaze. I can try. Hours later, the rain had deepened to a downpour. The hospital windows rattled faintly as thunder rolled across the city. Dr. Williams stood in the pharmacy lab, pretending to double-check prescriptions. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a small tube of toothpaste from the Billionaire's hygiene kit. She hesitated. It felt absurd, testing something so trivial. But the boy's voice came back to her again. Check his toothpaste. She slipped the tube into a specimen bag and sealed it. When she ran the test, the results froze her. Traces of methylmercury, so small they'd been missed in standard toxicology scans. Enough to build up over weeks. Enough to mimic neurological decline. Enough to kill him. Maria's breath caught. Her heart raced as realization dawned. The boy had been right. She grabbed the report and rushed to Dr. Peterson's office, the paper trembling in her hands. "Alan, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. Peterson looked up from his desk, irritated. "What is it now?" "It's the toothpaste," she said, voice shaking. "Trace mercury contamination, consistent with his symptoms." For a moment he just stared at her. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're basing this on what, Maria? Some janitor's bedtime theory?" "I tested it myself," she said firmly. "He's been absorbing small amounts every day. That's why the pattern repeats after his morning routine." Peterson's face darkened. "You don't realize what you're saying. You're accusing this hospital of negligence. Do you know what that would do to us?" "This isn't about us," she shot back. "It's about him." The argument grew louder. Outside the office, Kevin, who had sneaked back into the building through the service corridor, stood listening, his heart pounding. He had waited all morning for this moment. Now he heard the fear in their voices. The truth was finally cracking through the arrogance. Suddenly, alarms blared down the hall. A nurse's voice came through the intercom. "Code Blue, ICU room 903. Maria's eyes went wide. "That's Cross." She sprinted down the hall, Peterson right behind her. Kevin followed in silence, keeping to the shadows. Inside the suite, the billionaire's body convulsed violently, his monitor shrieking. Nurses surrounded him, working with frantic precision. Airway compromised. Someone shouted, "Administer another dose of—" "Don't!" Maria's voice cut through the chaos. "No more morphine." Dr. Peterson froze. Their eyes met across the bed. "Then what?" he demanded. Maria's voice steadied. "We detox him. Chelation therapy, immediately." "That's insane," Peterson said, but his words faltered when he saw the data on the monitor. The same sharp chemical spikes, just as the boy had said. Kevin stood just outside the glass, watching, breath held, hands trembling. "Please," he whispered, though no one could hear him. "Just listen." Finally, Peterson nodded. "Do it." Minutes stretched like hours. Then Cross's heart rate steadied. His color returned faintly. The room went still. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Maria turned to Peterson, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's responding." Peterson stared at the monitor in disbelief. "How?" Maria looked toward the hallway window, where she could just make out a boy's reflection in the glass. Small, still, watching. "He told us," she said quietly. "The boy told us." Outside, thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. Kevin turned away, wiping rain and tears from his face with his sleeve. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "You can't help everyone, maybe not. But tonight he had helped one. And tomorrow he knew. He wouldn't stop there." The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the city washed clean but heavy with quiet. Morning sunlight glimmered across the polished windows of Sterling Medical Center, filtering into William Cross's private suite like a hesitant blessing. The billionaire slept at last, his chest rising with a steadiness that had eluded him for weeks. Machines that once screamed in alarm now hummed softly, steady as a heartbeat. Dr. Maria Williams stood by the window, exhaustion painted across her face, her eyes rimmed red from a sleepless night. She watched Cross breathe, disbelief still anchoring her chest. He was alive. After all their brilliance, all their titles and theories, salvation had come from a boy, barely a teenager, who wasn't even supposed to be there. Dr. Alan Peterson entered the room quietly. His immaculate white coat rumpled for the first time in his career. He didn't meet Maria's eyes at first. Instead, he looked at the patient, then at the chart. "Vitals are stable," he murmured. "Kidneys are recovering. Mercury levels are dropping." Maria turned toward him, her voice low but sharp. "He would have died, Alan, you know that." He said nothing. The weight of her words filled the silence. Outside, in the quiet back hallway, Kevin Bowmont waited with his mother. His clothes were still damp from the rain, his mop leaning against the wall beside him. Diane sat with her hands folded tight, her heart pounding every time a doctor passed. "Kevin," she whispered, "I should have never let you come back here." He looked up at her, his eyes tired but alight with a quiet fire. "If I hadn't, he'd be dead, Mom." She sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. "You don't understand how this world works, baby. People like them, they don't see us. You make one wrong move and they'll make sure you never walk through these doors again." He smiled softly, but there was no joy in it. "Then I'll have to make the right move." Moments later, Dr. Williams appeared in the hallway. Her eyes found Kevin instantly. She hesitated, then motioned for him to come closer. Diane stood alarmed. "Ma'am, please, if there's a problem." But Maria shook her head. "No problem. I just want to talk to him." Kevin approached cautiously, his small frame dwarfed by the white coat before him. "You were right," she said simply. "About everything." Kevin blinked, unsure what to say. "Is he going to live?" "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "Because of you." For a moment, Diane looked like she might cry. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Dr. Peterson appeared behind Maria then, and the hallway seemed to freeze. His reputation carried weight even in silence. He studied Kevin for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, in a voice lower than anyone expected, he said, "You broke about 6 hospital rules, invaded a restricted area, and interfered with an active case." Kevin's shoulders straightened. He said nothing. Peterson's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "And you saved a man's life doing it." The air in the hallway changed, like a pressure release after a long storm. "Come with me," Peterson said, motioning toward his office. "Both of you." Inside, the office felt colder than usual. Degrees lined the wall in neat rows, polished glass gleaming under the light. Peterson sat behind his desk while Diane clutched her purse, her face pale with fear. "I'll make this simple," Peterson began, folding his hands. "What you did could get you both in trouble. But it won't." Diane's breath caught. "Sir, I should report it," he continued. "But I won't. Because," he paused, his voice faltering for once, "because I learned something last night." He turned to Kevin. "You saw what none of us did. And that scares me, if I'm honest. Not because you were right, but because we were too proud to listen." Maria smiled faintly from the corner, her eyes soft with admiration. "He's got the instincts of a natural diagnostician." Peterson glanced at her, then back to the boy. "Where did you learn all that?" Kevin shrugged. "I read and I watch. When you clean the same halls every night, people forget you're there, so I listen." Peterson leaned back, silent for a moment. Then slowly he nodded. "You might have just saved the most important man in America. Do you realize what that means?" Kevin looked down at his shoes. "It means maybe people will finally see my mom." The words hit like a quiet thunderclap. Maria blinked back tears. Even Peterson looked away, pretending to adjust a stack of papers. At that moment, a nurse burst into the doorway. "Dr. Peterson, Mr. Cross is awake. He's asking for the boy." The room fell silent. Kevin froze. "Me?" Peterson exhaled slowly. "Seems the billionaire wants to meet his doctor." When Kevin stepped into Cross's suite, the room felt impossibly large. Sunlight spilled through the windows, painting the white walls in gold. Cross lay in bed, his face pale but alert, his sharp blue eyes fixed on the boy who stood hesitantly at the foot of his bed. "You," Cross said, his voice hoarse but steady. "You're the one who figured it out." Kevin nodded quietly. For a long time, the billionaire simply studied him, the boy in hand-me-down sneakers and a wrinkled hoodie who had done what no one else could. Then slowly, Cross smiled. "What's your name, son?" "Kevin Bowmont." Cross nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Kevin Bowmont, the world owes you a debt, and I don't intend to forget it." Diane stood frozen at the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. Cross gestured for her to come closer. "You raised him?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, sir. I just clean here." "You raised a genius," Cross interrupted gently. "And I intend to make sure neither of you ever has to clean another floor again." In that moment, the hospital, the sterile, indifferent machine that had ignored them for years, felt like it had shifted. Dr. Peterson, watching from the doorway, lowered his gaze. Maria placed a quiet hand on his arm. "Sometimes," she whispered, "it takes someone invisible to show us what's been right in front of us all along." Kevin looked around at the doctors, the nurses, his mother, and the man he had saved. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Cross's jaw flexed. He was at my bedside 2 days ago, telling me how much he prayed for my recovery. He wanted your seat, Maria said quietly. You were about to remove him from the board. This was his way of making sure you never could. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Cross looked up, his eyes like blue fire. Where's the boy? Kevin stepped forward, nervous but unflinching. You're not supposed to know the things you know, Cross said softly. But maybe that's what makes you dangerous. Kevin swallowed. You said you wanted the truth. Cross's gaze softened, just slightly. And you gave it to me. He turned to Peterson, who had entered quietly behind them. Call the police. And the press. I want this public by sunrise. Peterson hesitated. Sir, are you sure this could end me? Cross interrupted. I've already been to the edge of death. I'm not afraid anymore. He looked at Kevin again, his voice quiet but powerful. You didn't just save my life, son. You saved my soul. Maria smiled faintly, tears bright in her eyes. Diane arrived moments later, breathless and terrified, only to find her son standing beside the billionaire as cameras flashed through the windows. Reporters shouted questions as security escorted a handcuffed Elias Crow through the lobby, his face pale and expression broken. When one reporter asked, Mr. Cross, who discovered the plot? The billionaire placed a steady hand on Kevin's shoulder. A janitor's son, he said simply. The smartest person in the room. The flashbulbs burst like fireworks. And in that single, breathtaking moment, the boy who had once been invisible became a symbol, a reminder that truth doesn't wear a white coat, and brilliance doesn't need a title. Later that night, after the cameras were gone and the hospital fell quiet again, Cross stood by his window watching the rain return. Kevin stood beside him, looking out at the city that now seemed impossibly vast. Do you know what you'll do now? Cross asked. Kevin smiled faintly. Maybe study. Maybe learn for real this time. Cross nodded. When you're ready, there will be a scholarship waiting. A real one, with your name on it. Kevin's eyes shone. Thank you, sir. Cross turned toward him, his voice lower, warmer. No, Kevin. Thank you. You reminded me that not every genius wears a suit. Outside, thunder rumbled once more, soft, distant, fading into dawn, and as the first light broke across Sterling Medical Center, the world knew his name. The janitor's son. The boy who did the impossible. The invisible genius who made the world see.